Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to this review of the Tier 9 American heavy tank. This is of course the M103. As ever, we'll start off with just a little bit of history for those who are interested. So the M103 was designed for a very similar purpose as the British Conqueror, which I've got here. It was basically designed in the post-war period to kill latter Soviet IS tanks, so things like the IS-3 for example. And to do that, it was mounted with a dirty great big 120mm gun to put nice big holes in those Soviet tanks. The tank was actually the last heavy tank to be designed by the Americans and used by the American military, and in the event of the roughly 300 machines that were manufactured, around about 70-80 went to the American Army and the rest went to the Marine Corps. This tank, when it was first going through its design process, and that the initial versions of this tank did suffer from some engine problems. These were later ironed out, but one feature that stuck with this tank throughout its operational life was that it had a very short operational range. Initially, it would run out of fuel after about 80 miles travelled, and that's really not very impressive, but there we go. One thing that is quite impressive about this tank was that it was made using a much more efficient armour layout than its predecessor, the T-29, and so that meant that while the M103 had greater armoured protection than the T-29, it was actually around about 10 tons lighter, allowing it to more easily keep pace with tanks such as the IS-8, for example, that were fairly mobile Soviet machines. Anyway, what is it that we actually have in game? Well, this thing finds itself, of course, at Tier 9, as I already mentioned. So let's just take a look at what we can expect. This thing follows on from the T-29 at Tier 7 and then the T-32 at Tier 8. But this is a very different machine. Those two previous machines really put all their armour emphasis on the front of the turret. They were very, very, very good hull-down tanks. This thing, not so much, and hopefully you're going to see what I mean as we go through this review. Going to talk more about the gun in a bit, and that is actually a point of some interest, so I will spend some time on it, but it does indeed mount a 120mm gun, as you could gather from the introduction. 1850 hit points. If we compare that with the Conqueror, which gets 1950, we can start seeing that 1850 isn't actually all that impressive. We've got the WZ here with 1850, but this is the stock WZ, does not have the fully upgraded turret, and so 1850 for the M103 is a little on the low side, surprising for what is actually quite a large machine. 228mm on the front of the hull, 44 on the sides, 44 on the rear, 254 on the front of the turret, 99 on the sides, 53 on the rear. We're going to look at the armour in more detail later on. These numbers are not exactly to be believed, as is usually the case, but it is worth noting that especially the sides and especially rear of this tank, both the hull and the turret, are so pitifully weak that there are a reasonable number of high explosive rounds in the game that can penetrate you there and do you some damage. I've penetrated the rear of these tanks with the Soviet 152mm derp guns that you find on like the Su-152, etc. So that is one thing to bear in mind, but we will look at the armour in more detail later on. This tank is pushing 60 tons, mine here is 57.49 tons with an 860 horsepower engine, giving this thing basically 15 horsepower per ton, which for a heavy tank is not too shabby. Top speed limit of 34 kilometers an hour, reverse speed of 12 kilometers an hour, traverse speed of 30.53 degrees per second. Bear in mind the actual traverse speed is a combination of that, your engine and your ground resistances and all that jazz, and when you combine that all into one package, what you find is the M103, whilst it definitely in terms of mobility feels like a heavy tank, it does feel like one of the more mobile heavy tanks in the game, so there is that. Concealment, it's a heavy tank, why would we even bother? Spotting, interestingly, this tank does actually get a fairly decent view range, 390 meters with the fully upgraded turret, that's 370 with the stock turret, so that is none too shabby. It does mean that if you so wish, you could run with coated optics on this tank without too much issue. Let's take a quick look at the grind you're going to be facing. This is the tank, and there's good news and there's bad news, really, with this thing. The top engine is only found on the M103. Now, this is a bit weird. The top engine leads to the T110E5, but the top engine is not actually shared with the T110E5. It's the top gun that's shared with the E5, but you don't need to unlock the top gun on this tank in order to unlock the Tier 10. Which means that if you want, you can skip out the top turret and the top gun. This thing is, that's what, 60,000 experience plus another 23, so that's 83,000 experience combined with, what, 365,000 credits. You don't have to spend if you don't want to. Now, obviously, if you do that, you're getting a worse machine. But it's just a point I wanted to note here. It's a really weird way in which the M103 grind is laid out. So you can skip these two top modules if you wish. I personally didn't. I wanted to see what this tank was like fully upgraded, but you can do it. Suspension, of course, it's unique to the M103. You're not going to have that already unlocked. The top radio, potentially you might have unlocked if you've played some of the light tanks in particular, or the T-54E1 in the American Tech Tree. But if you've only played the heavies, you're not going to have that unlocked either. And the gun is unique to this tank, so you're not going to have that unlocked, this middle gun. So your stock configuration is going to be rather painful, due in no small part to the fact that you're going to be using the same tired old 105mm gun that you had on the T32 and on the T29. So 198mm of armor piercing penetration on a tier 9 tank? Oh dear, this is quite painful, and I would actually recommend dropping some free experience on this intermediate 120mm gun. 25,000 XP to unlock that gun, and I would recommend doing it. If anyone hears anything weird in this video, by the way, I do apologise. My cat is being a little bit lively, shall we say. So that is something that is definitely worth bearing in mind. You really do want this gun just to make your life a bit less painful. This gun packs just over 240 penetration with armor piercing, 340 with heat. 0.4 dispersion is not great, 2.6 second aim time is not great. This gun is not particularly fantastic, but it is better than the stock gun. And if you decide not to use the top turret and the top gun on this tank, it is of course the gun you will be using. Speaking of guns, let's take a quick look. So we've got the stock gun that we're not even going to talk about. That thing is garbage. We've got this intermediate gun that is worth mentioning, as you're probably going to spend some time grinding with that gun regardless of what options you should choose on this tank. So with the intermediate gun, you get 5.26 rounds a minute rate of fire, 242 average pen, as I mentioned, 0.4 dispersion, 2.6 second aim time. It's a gun that works best at close range. The gun gets the job done, and that's about the best thing you can say about it. It is not a good gun, but it is not completely and utterly hideous. If you do want to mount the top gun on this tank along with the top turret, then your rate of fire, if you compare them, is a bit higher, your penetration is higher, your fully aimed accuracy is better, and your aiming time is better. Basically everything aside from the alpha damage is better. And better is better. I know I'm stating the obvious there. So, yeah, I went for the top gun. Whether you do or not is entirely up to you. Should actually point out, let's just quickly compare this gun with the same gun on, well, not the same gun, sorry, with the 120mm gun on the Conqueror. You'll notice that the M103's gun fires slightly faster. The penetration is, to all intents and purposes, the same, 258 versus 259. You do get slightly better premium penetration with the M103's gun, but there's not too much in it, and that is heat ammunition, does come with some problems. Worse high explosive shells, the Conqueror does get that very nice HESH ammunition with 120mm of penetration, much worse accuracy and a worse aim time. So basically, you get a slightly better rate of fire with the M103, but worse aim time and worse accuracy. All things considered, I think the Conqueror has the slightly better gun, but you know, your mileage may vary. This is not a bad gun, but it's not a fantastic gun either. In terms of crew skills, equipment and all that jazz, what is it that we're running with? Well, vertical stabilizer, you want a vertical stabilizer, don't argue, just get it. Gun rammer, very similar comment. Third equipment slot, I've got vents, but you could definitely make a case for coated optics on this tank. I don't really think you want anything else. But one of those two is definitely the way you want to go. Ammunition-wise, you get 33 rounds of ammunition, slightly weird ammo capacity, but never mind. I've got 3 rounds of HE, 5 of heat, and 25 of armor piercing. I generally found that okay. The only times I really ended up using the heat were either against things like the Type 4 or Type 5 Heavy, because screw those tanks, or against some of the high-tiered Swedish tank destroyers, just because the armor is angled back at such a ridiculous angle. And heat does have a different auto bounce angle, so there is that. Consumables, I've just got your standard sets here. American tanks do have a habit of catching on fire if you shoot them in the bum. This thing does have a kind of dodgy ammo rack, so you definitely want the repair kit. You'd want the repair kit anyway. And med pack, yeah, you want that. So I wouldn't recommend running this thing with cola or anything along those lines, but I guess you could try it out if you really wanted. But don't come running to me if it don't really work very well. Crew skills, this is probably not going to be hugely surprising. This is a heavy tank at the end of the day. I've got Sixth Sense, repairs, safe stowage, I mentioned that ammo rack. Brothers in Arms, of course, and then things like Smooth Ride, Snapshot, all the usual good stuff that you would normally find on most tanks, to be honest, but in particular on a heavy tank here. So, with all that said and done, let's go and have a quick look at the armor profile of this tank, where some of the dodgy module locations might be, and some gameplay. Okay, so let's just quickly look at some of the module locations for this tank, and there's only really one we want to pay too much attention to here. Let's just get the easy one out of the way. Engine, fuel tanks at the back of the hull. Shoot this thing in the back of the hull, it's probably going to burn like most American tanks. The one I actually want to pay attention to is the ammo rack location. So the ammo rack can be found in the side of the hull, just below the front of the turret. And we can have a look around the other side of the tank, and it's there again. And toward the front of the turret itself, in the turret, that's where your ammo rack is. So that's where you want to aim if you want to ammo rack this thing, and those are the sections of your armor you want to be very careful about showing off to the bad guys. Because of the ammo rack location, you can also get ammo racked if you get shot in the hull, so do bear that in mind. But I think it's just time to go and have a look at the armor of this thing. Okay, so let's see how well that armor holds up. Let's just start off with the bad news. As mentioned, the rear armor and the hull the armor's trash at the back. In fact, it's even worse than advertised. Advertised in the garage, they say the rear of the hull is 50-something millimeters thick. Most of it is actually 28. Yeah. There's a strip up here that's 44.5. There's some strips down here that are 57.2. But this bit, this main section, is 27.9 millimeters thick. HE goes through it like butter. Rear of the turret, not quite as bad. 53.3 millimeters thick, but still bad. If we have a look at the side profile of the tank, big fat side profile, side of the hull, 57.2. I say 57.2, it is 57.2, but towards the front it gets a little bit thicker, so you end up with sort of 63.5 there, 59.7. So the rear of the hull is slightly weaker, though honestly the entire side profile is pretty weak. On the turret, similar kind of story. Rear of the turret, you're looking at sort of 78 millimeters of effective armor, going up to, well, it hits around about sort of 200-300 in places, but most of this is about 150 and relatively easy to pen. Also, commander's hatch, 110 odd millimeters of effective armor. You can easily shoot that if it's showing it, and this is a big fat turret. From the top, massive turret roof and engine deck, all weak as sin. Artillery has a field day. From the front, right, lower front plate, the centre is around about 210 effective. Round to the sides of the lower front plate, though, that angle drops off and you're looking at closer to, well, in some cases like 130, 140, up to about 180 millimeters thick, so shooting it in the sides of this lower front plate is not a bad plan. The beak nose on the hull, don't really bother with, and the upper front plate again is also pretty good, probably best not bothering with. Should note this region here, you're not going to be shooting this thing directly, but it is only 25 millimeters thick, and so any shots that hit the gun mantlet can bounce off and go through there. It's a shot trap, so just do be aware of that. Having a look at the turret, it's very much a good news, bad news situation. A lot of the turret is so angled that you're just not going to go through. Gun mantlet itself tends to be around about 300 millimeters thick, give or take. There's some regions that are thicker and some regions that are thinner, but then we have to get to the bad news. Bad news is one, commander's hatch, 110 plus millimeters thick effective armor. I mean, that might be challenging for some tier 4 and 5s to get through, but this is a tier 9 machine. No one's going to have problems getting through that. And then we have to talk about the turret roof. 38.1 millimeters thick. Okay, so let's try and put this into real money. 38.1. That means, although it's angled back at a ridiculous angle, that means that if you are packing a gun that is, what, 115 millimeters or greater in caliber, you can overmatch the hell out of this turret roof. So in practice, because there are, as far as I'm aware, no 115mm guns in World of Tanks, in practice that means 120mm guns and upwards, of which there are plenty at tiers 7 and above, which is what this tank is going to be facing. They're the tiers of the tank it's going to be facing off, can just go straight through that section without having to worry to really aim too much, just aim for the roof. And suddenly the M103's turret roof plus the commander's cupola becomes a giant weak point. If this tank is using its gun depression, you can hide a lot of that. So this tank is good hull down if you are using the gun depression. If you are not using the gun depression, bleh, icky. What about side scrape potential? It's not too bad actually. The side might be relatively thin, but you can actually get some decent values out of it with the chunky tracks, and you can angle it at a good angle. So side scraping with this tank is a viable choice. So there's the armour. All the armour's at the front, and yeah, even then it's not everywhere. So do be aware of that. This tank's armour can be very hit or miss. Some bits of it are awesome, and some bits of it will just let you down if someone so much as sneezes in your general direction. Time for some gameplay, methinks. Here we are then with the first match, a tier 9 game on Malinovka of all maps. And actually, one thing that's interesting, if you just have a look over at the Mauschen on our right hand side, another tier 9 heavy tank, we are sitting at 1850 hit points. It's got 2300. I mean, jeez. There are tier 10 heavy tanks that wish they had that much. Anyway, never mind. We are going to be making our way over to the hill on this map. Try and make ourselves as useful as we possibly can. I mean, we're a tier 9 and a tier 10 game. We should still be able to do something that is of use. And having a look at how the team is distributed, we've got an E75 coming this way. Lerva kind of coming this way, but taking the long route about it. An IS-3 deciding that base camping is his best port of call, and a Mauschen who went the other way, and so is also base camping. Yeah, this sounds good, doesn't it? This is not 357 making, this is a 510. There are 5 top tiers and then 10 mid/bottom tiers, so this is a tier 9 maximum match, but with no tier 7s in it. Lowest tier tank is a tier 8. And just having a think, what do we expect to find up there on that hill? Well, the Conqueror may well go up there. I should point out that this game is from patch 9.20, I think, 9.21. It's from the patch just before the top tier British heavy tanks got changed. So the Conqueror isn't the buffed Conqueror, this is the old Conqueror, but still better than the old Conqueror, if that makes sense, and still better than this tank, really. Although, as we're going to see in a minute, that is assuming the guy is fully upgraded, which this chap is not, so that's going to play in our favour. Had this been a fully upgraded Conqueror, I'm not actually sure how much difference it would have made. He'd have had less gun depression in this particular match. Had this been a fully upgraded new Conqueror, he'd have been problematic. I mean, he still gives us problems, but he would have been problematic. So we've come up here, we're the only people up this far on the hill. There's a few medium tanks and a heavy lagging some way behind. And we're going to see how the armour holds up. Hello, Mr. Conqueror. He bounces on us. We put that shot... Well, so this is the stock turret on the Conqueror at the time, the Action X turret. And I was expecting those shots to pretty much go through the front of his turret. It's not the strongest thing in the world, but there we go. Now, interestingly, on the one hand, the Conqueror has literally just switched to firing APCR, and hence is going straight through us, but... well, if we're actually going to look at it, the fact that he's firing APCR doesn't matter. He bounced one shot off the front of our hull. I assume he was aiming for our lower front plate. And where he's actually hitting us in the sort of commander's cupola at the back there, it wouldn't make the blindest ape of the difference whether he were firing armour piercing or APCR. So, there we go. Our commander's down as we take another penetration. At least we're able to put one into him in return. Now, this guy's using the 20-pounder gun, which means he has a rather impressive rate of fire, and we are already down to 580 hit points. And this is what I mean about I'm not sure how different it would be if this guy had been fully upgraded, because at the time of playing this, yes, he'd have had a bigger gun, yes, he'd have had a better hull, a better turret, ooh, there's another one, but he wouldn't have had as much gun depression. Now the new Conqueror would have the gun depression, and the new Conqueror is just vastly superior to the M103 in pretty much every way that matters. So far we've had a pretty naff game. We've failed miserably to do much against that Conqueror. Really surprised at how well the Action X turret is holding up. Though, to be fair, the turret is relatively strong when you are hull down, so I guess I shouldn't complain too much. Switch to the 112. We take a little bit of a risk in aiming that one, but we managed to put the shot into one of his cupolas without taking any return damage. Seeing if we can try a similar thing again, we can't. He was backing off. We kind of had to take a shot if we wanted to do any damage. So far we've only done 838 damage. Oh, we bounce another shot there from the Conqueror, aiming for this guy's lower front plate. There we go. And that guy's only got 38 hit points left in him. So we're just going to see if we can finish this fellow off. And would you credit it, the shot just goes into the dirt. Because of course it does. Why would it go anywhere else? ML1 now, into the hull. Although, to be fair, the turret isn't really strong enough to bounce this gun, unless maybe he's hull down, and even then it's certainly not guaranteed. Conqueror has backed off, so we're going for the ML again. Sorry, it's an ML2, not an ML1. My apologies. So when hull down, using all his gun depression, yes, that turret would give us problems. But shots into the hull, not so much. Shot toward the Conqueror again there, but he stays alive. Really, if I'm going to nail the Conqueror, I should probably switch to HE here, but I don't know that the Conqueror is definitely going to be my next shot, and, well, that actually HE against the Scorpion would also do the job nicely, so go figure. But a nice meaty hit into that Scorpion over there, although you will notice we are down to 11 rounds of armor piercing. We have bounced a few shots on the Conqueror, or bounced and missed a few shots, so... yeah, you do start running out of ammunition relatively quickly in this thing. Conqueror has now gone down to our Lerva, and that's a rather brave guard. We've been spotted, so we really want to get forwards and into a position from which we can actually reliably bounce things. That would be nice. Guard is not giving us an easy shot at him. Can't really blame him. I mean, he's doing a good job. Aim the shot slightly. There we go. Finish him off and just move forwards. I'm trying to get close to that sort of little abbey ruin thing, because it would provide some protection from all of the bad guys. We know there's a Scorpion over there. Oh, there's a guard and an Object 252U who have actually completely gone around the flank. So we'll see if we can do anything about them. There's no easy shot here. I mean, this game is not won. Scoreline is 8-7. Yes, we've taken the hill, so that should give us the advantage, but, well, we've all seen teams balls it up before. I am not exactly being Mr. Brave, because I only have, what, 2,800, sorry, 2,800? I have 378 hit points left. Might help if I actually looked at my hit points rather than the damage done. Going for this blind shot on the AT-15, no joy. Ah, well. Scoreline's 9-9. Definitely this match is still losable, especially when certainly two of our top tier remaining tanks, myself and the C75, don't have a lot of health between us. In fact, add our hit points together and you get a shade over 400. Our friendly Malshan has 2 kills to his credit, but he's still by our base. There's the enemy guard, or the remaining enemy guard, perhaps I should say. He's popped up. Oh, no, Skoda takes him down, so that leaves the score lines 10-9. Object 416 around here somewhere, so we need to be careful. I mean, we need to be careful of everyone, to be fair. The armour on this thing, whilst it can bounce some stuff, as you've seen in this replay, it is not reliable. And I'm just actually going to speed this along a little bit, because I end up just letting the game pass for a little while. Because the last thing I want to do is poke out, get deleted, and then my team is another tank down, a top tier tank at that. So just letting things progress. We will pop out from behind this chapel at some point, I promise. And there we go, and we find the enemy Malshan. Managed to bounce his shot, don't penetrate our own. Sorry about that. But we know where he is. So with any luck, people might be able to get some flanking shots into this guy. There's also potentially an Object 416 over there, the AT-15 in the background too. Oh, speaking of the 416, oh god, oh god, oh god, he's got terrible gun depression, and he actually goes for the killing shot on the E75. Can't really say I blame him there, as the shot on me wouldn't necessarily be a killing shot, and need a high damage roll, and as it is, he eventually takes a shot on me and doesn't pen. But we're able to shoot the guy, track him, get some assistance damage when he gets taken out. Scoreline is 12-10. And there is the Malshan, who is currently looking the wrong way. So we're going to take advantage of that and just sneak a shot into the side of his turret. Just a shade under 500 hit points left for him. So he is still not a one-shot for us. It would take 2 shots to finish this fellow off. And he's looking in this general direction. So I have no real intention of poking out whilst he's looking this way. That would be kind of dumb. And we don't want to be kind of dumb. We lose our WZ-120, but it's just the Malshan and the Centurion 7/1 remaining. Hopefully we should have this, but again, this is not a completely foregone conclusion. Especially as the Centurion then takes out our Lorraine, and our Skoda appears to be going for this Malshan. He can take a hit if necessary. So if he distracts the Malshan, I will happily sneak another shot into the guy. Can we do it? Yes, we can. Skoda takes a big hit to the face. I managed to put a shot into the side of the Malshan's turret, going to see if I can get another one, but the Skoda's already got this covered, and that is the match. So let's go and have a look at the post-game stats for this one. That game actually ended up being enough for first-class mastery in the M103, Fire for Effect, Bruiser, and a Confederate medal. 4,319 damage done, 1 kill, 1,114 base experience. Commiserations to the enemy Centurion, 3.3k damage, not enough to pull his team over the winning line, alas. 21 shots fired, 16 hits, 11 penetrations. Oh dear, for that damage count, this is going to be an expensive game, isn't it? 12 hits received, 7 penned, 5 did not, for 1,410 damage blocked by our armour. 7 enemy vehicles damaged, 1 of them destroyed, 824 assistance damage, 2.29 kilometers travelled with a standard account despite receiving almost 40,000 credits. Because we fired so much ammunition and a lot of it didn't hit or bounced, we only made a 1,260 credit profit. Experience wise, it was a ×3 experience event running at the time, so we got a good amount of that. So there we go. Saw what the M103's armour tends to be like and also what the gun tends to be like. Anyway, let's go and have a look at another game and see how that goes. Here we go with game number 2 then, tier 10 match, and no, do not adjust your sets. Yes, this is Malinovka again. I don't know why, I got Malinovka, I guess, when playing this tank quite a bit. Never mind. So this is 357 matchmaking. We are of course one of 5 tier 9 machines on our team, and there'll be 5 on the enemy team, and so once again we are going up to the hill. And once again, we may well get our faces wrecked because, oh, that turret roof armour. What are we likely to find up here? Well, IS-7 doesn't have great gun depression, but does have pretty natty armour. T-57 Heavy doesn't have great armour, but does have a 120mm autoloader. Maybe the T-10s, maybe a Lerva. He might actually be a bit of a problem, because he can go hull down and bounce us all day long, and pen us all day long. Yeah, well, there's the T-57 Heavy, so it definitely looks like we're going to be seeing him. Who's coming with us? T-57 Heavy. Type 5 Heavy, is that a T-30 or something? Okay. No, it's a medium, so it can't be a T-30. Anyway, oh, Skoda. IS-7 is firing HE. Okay, that's a thing. Now, either A, he had the HE loaded in case he come across some light tanks, in which case he might be a fairly decent player. Or B, he had the HE loaded for special reasons, and given that I just took another HE round from him, it looks like it might be special reasons. We managed to only blow the Batchat's tracks off there, which is slightly irritating, but we can try again, and we are backing off here, and he puts around. Where did that shot land? Oh, let's just let ours go. Yep. Where did he manage to pen us? Oh, lower front plate. Fair enough. So we've bounced 1200 damage so far. Oh, we spotted the Lerva. EP. Bounced 1200 damage so far. We've put one shot into a Batchat and one shot into someone else that I can't quite remember. T-44. Your turret isn't that good, mate. Okay, maybe it is. That wasn't a particularly well aimed shot, in all fairness. And we have a Type 5 Heavy here with us, just derping people in the face every 20 seconds or whatever the hell the reload on that gun is. Probably less than 20 seconds actually, but I don't know. There you can see what happens if you angle your turret even slightly. We take a shot right through the side of the front of the turret there from the Skoda T50. Thankfully he doesn't have an autoloader, and the Type 5 Heavy's telling me to get back. He will do the tanking. Fair enough, he's the one with all the armour, so who am I to argue? So far this is a rather underwhelming match, and it's actually only ourselves and the Type 5 Heavy who are up here really at the top of the hill. And there's quite a lot of bad guys on the enemy team, so that's a thing. T-57 Heavy coming around. I really need to protect the flanks of my Type 5 Heavy here, because the Type 5 is the one who is holding back the flood. So with that in mind, we're going to try and keep the T-57 Heavy off his side. He's going to take some damage, our Type 5 Heavy here, but we're going to try and minimise the amount of damage it is that he takes. Hello, Mr. T10. That shot's probably not going to penetrate, so we're not going to bother with it. That one, however, at the Skoda T50, thank you very much. Please come again another time. And we pick up a kill on him. T-57 Heavy is trying something, so we punish him for his something. With a nice damage roll of 443 into the side of his turret, that looked like. Someone's firing HE at the Type 5, I think it's our Lerva. Meanwhile, the Type 5 is getting utterly slam-dunked here. But it's testament to how strong the armour on that tank is that he has held off 5 or 6 enemy tanks pretty much on his own. I was just keeping his flanks clear. But with him dead, I now decide discretion is the better part of valour, and we need to be somewhere else. Put a nice, lovely shot into the T-57 Heavy while we're leaving. And now you're going to see what I mean about the armour being very, very RNG. So you've seen what happened where the armour fails, and now you're seeing what happens when the armour doesn't fail, as we are not dead yet. Oh, there's one from the IS-7. It's finally found his one key to fire AP. Well done to him. And one into the T10 there. Bounce another shot from the IS-7 this time. Can't return fire on the IS-7 because the Blighter's hull down. Can we give the T10 a parting gift? Yes, we can. And that's just our gun damaged. But eventually it takes a Batchat in the side to take us down. Bit of a shame there. But nonetheless, that's what the M103's armour can do at longer range when people either don't know where to shoot you or fail to hit those places. So the armour can hold up, just don't expect too much from it. Anyway, let's just head back to the garage. I'm not planning to make you sit here and watch the rest of this game for reasons that will become apparent. So despite the fact that that game, it looked like our team were capping, we did actually win it, but we actually won it by wipeout. The game ended up going on for about another 4-ish minutes after my demise, so I wasn't going to make you sit through and watch that. Nonetheless, that game was enough for second class mastery and fire for effect. We finished the top of our team, 3,013 damage done, 2 kills, 1,050 base XP. Shout out for our Type 5 heavy, just shy of 3k damage, bouncing stuff like a boss. Very well done to him. 10 shots fired, 10 hits, 8 pens for that damage count. 17 hits received, 6 penetrated, 11 did not. 1 bit of splash damage there for 3,480 damage blocked by our armour. 5 enemy vehicles spotted, 5 of them damaged, 2 destroyed, 343 assistance damage, and a 4-ish thousand credit profit with a standard account. Never going to be too impressive, given that well, we were running a standard account and it is a tier 9 machine. So anyway, there's a couple of bits of gameplay for you, so let's just go and round things up in the garage. So the M103, what do I think about this? Well, I think it's actually a pretty bad tank, and this is one of those rare situations where I'm not saying I find it bad, but I think it's okay, it's just a preference thing. If you look up the statistics of this tank, depending on which source you use, it varies a little bit, you know, which website for the statistics that you use, but this tank is consistently one of the worst performing, or in some cases the worst performing, tier 9 heavy tanks. It is bad. Why is it so bad? I think there's a few different things. Your armour is very hit or miss. If the enemy don't aim properly or are shooting at very long range, yes, it can hold up fairly well. Yes, with the big tracks it can side scrape reasonably well, but there are just big glaring weak spots on this thing that you can just shoot all day long with even lower tier tanks and make a real mess of this machine. And so this thing has notable weaknesses and doesn't really have any particular strength. Any of the other tier 9 heavy tanks can easily find a situation in which they will outperform an M103, which in and of itself is fine if the M103 were just a jack of all trades and a good all-rounder, and it kind of is, but you struggle to see how this thing is going to beat any of the other tier 9 heavy tanks without the odds being weighed considerably in this tank's favour. Perhaps the clearest way I can make this point is by comparing this thing with the Conqueror. When the Conqueror came out, when the British tanks were introduced, essentially the Conqueror had the way better gun, much better gun. But the Conqueror's armour was inferior, and it had slightly worse gun depression. So the M103, because the two tanks are so very similar, the M103 was better armoured and had slightly better flexibility in exchange for a worse gun, and that kind of sounds vaguely balanced. Then of course the game progresses and you do get a little bit of power creep, and they decided the Conqueror wanted to give it a bit of love, so they buffed the turret armour. Okay, fine. So now the Conqueror has a better gun. The M103 still has slightly better gun depression, but you can now argue the Conqueror has better armour. The Conqueror's armour, the turret front is better, which makes it better hull down. If it's not hull down, its lower front plate is still a big fat glaring weak point, or its hull in general, to be honest. Sure, but I would argue that when they buffed the turret armour on the Conqueror, they made the Conqueror just better than the M103. And then when they rejigged the British heavy tank line and they introduced the Super Conqueror, they buffed the Conqueror again. Okay, so they slightly nerfed the gun. The gun took a little bit of a rate of fire hit, so now it has a worse rate of fire than the M103. They also slightly nerfed the mobility, sure, but they considerably buffed the armour on both the turret and the hull. This frontal plate is better than it used to be. It's what? I think it's still 152 millimeters. I think there's maybe a little bit of extra armor. Maybe I'm getting confused with the Super Conqueror. Either way, they basically buffed the armor again, to the point where this thing now is just flat out better in pretty much every way, or any way that matters, than the M103. Any advantages the M103 has are really small in comparison to the Conqueror, like a fractionally better rate of fire. And so... Oh, they also buffed the gun depression on the Conqueror as well, so it has 10 degrees of gun depression, so it beats the M103 at that as well now. So the M103 is just left in this really awkward, tired state. And, well, will they give it some love at some point? Maybe. I don't know. What would they do to it? I genuinely don't know without turning it into a Conqueror clone. Not sure. By all means, if you've got any thoughts about what they could do to the M103 to make it suck less, shove your thoughts down in the comments, because at the moment, this is a pretty poor tank. And yeah, I know I've got 2 marks of excellence on it, but that doesn't make the tank good. And if you want, that's backed up by a 48% win rate. Oh yeah, I'm good. Anyway, there we go. There's my review of the Conqueror. I hope some of you found it vaguely entertaining and or useful. If you did, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel. And as ever, I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.